Restorers, if you're using Xactimate, you need the live estimating guidance of the actual Xactimate profile. It guides your scope as you write it and reminds you of relevant line items you should be including in real time. The result? Accurate, well-justified estimates, reducing friction and maximizing efficiency. No more mistakes, no more missed line items. Try the actionable profile today and get 99% off your first month. Visit getinsights.org for more info.
Hey Restorers, welcome to a fresh episode of the Restoration Today podcast. It has been a long time since I've had somebody on to talk biohazard recovery, crime scene cleanup, trauma scene cleanup, forensic restoration, whatever terminology you choose to use in this area. It has been a while since I've had somebody on talking about that. And I'm excited to have the new president of ABRA, the American Biorecovery Association. They have a new president. The association's been around for a while. My guess is if you do any work in this realm, you are very familiar with Scott Vogel, he's the COO of EmergiClean, which is several generation, I think, family business at this point. And so I'm excited to have Scott here to talk about ABRA and what that organization does, some best practices when you're doing work in this area, lots of different things. So Scott, welcome in. Thanks for being here. I'm going to toss it over to you to have you introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background in the industry.
Well, thank you. To start off, my name is Scott Vogel, and I've been in the industry now for 29 years. Although I'm only 40, my first cleanup was actually when I was 14 years old. However, second generation family owned. I'm actually currently getting my doctorate, my DRPH, out of Rutgers University regarding the remediation of biohazard remediation and the occupational health and safety of it in our realm and how we can better understand it, as well as how we will look at going into a job and how we're able to handle emergency response. A little bit more, I mean, my company, medium-sized firm, we handle about anywhere from 800 to 1,000 blood cleanup scenes a year. So we're active in the industry. We're out of New Jersey. But yeah, I've been doing this. I've probably handled or consulted for over 12 to 13,000 jobs throughout my career, where it started from all the way up to bioterrorism. So your simple suicide, your maybe a little cut all the way up to bioterrorism. We've been we've had accommodations from the FDA for doing a biohazardous, bioterrorism job. So there's certain things that we've done that unfortunately I can't really talk in detail about,
Yep.
but I've seen it all, from level C to level A when it comes to PPE. And again, we do house a full level A bioterrorism unit here. So we are able to respond throughout the country. And we also help out the U.S. Army. We've talked to them and been in partnerships with them going forward within my company.
What kind of things would a bioterrorism unit respond to just in generalities?
So ricin, anthrax, anything major that you're going to do. And when we look at the biological end of it right now, it's one of the scariest things that's are going on, because after COVID, even though it wasn't used as a biological agent, we saw we saw what we would react to. All our pandemic plans were based on influenzas, right? And this was a simple coronavirus, and it just shot us in the foot. So we definitely did see a huge weakness in how we prepare and how we respond to pandemics. And now knowing that biological agents can become a lot more common, they can be designed in a lab and released in a large population, we're now concerned that in the next couple of years that you're probably going to see one or two biological attacks on the United States or somewhere where we're going to need to be ready and be able to have capabilities to respond to that.
Yeah. Okay. So what is ABRA? Explain ABRA to people who are not familiar with that association.
So the American Biorecovery Association started in a couple people's probably in 94, 95, 7 guys got together and started saying, hey, look, we need to kind of come up with a association that just deals with the biohazardous industry. In 97, they were incorporated. And then since then, they've been rocking it. In 2015, myself and Tom Licker, which is the former president, we kind of got together and said, we wanted to make our certification program a little bit outside the box, more like accreditations. So
Hmm.
what we did was we got rid of all the instructors in ABRA, and we actually now make it a test-based certification, which means you have to meet our prereqs and then you can just sit and challenge our test.
Mm.
Once you sit and challenge our test, then if you pass your certified biorecovery technician, we have 3 levels. We have certified biorecovery technician, certified biorecovery supervisor, and certified biorecovery master. The master test is probably one of the hardest tests that is out there. Right now, we actually have a 95% fail rate. MDs have failed it. Our technician rate is about a 60% failure rate. So, just a basic entry level technician, we're seeing the platform and the training so lackadaisical in our industry and not really emphasizing what we actually truly do and respond to, that when they sit there, they sit, when you sit for a test, you should know the materials, right? When you have a 65% fail rate, that tells you that this industry is not where it needs to be, from understanding basic concepts to more advanced concepts as well. But nobody's really getting a grasp of that. And that's alarming. But after that, the American Biorecovery Association, now really what we're symbolizing outside of the certification realm, is the networking as well as the educational. When you deal with the American Biorecovery Association, you have some of the most prestiged, the most well-known names within the industry in that association. So you have people that have done most of your mass shootings, the Texas shooting, all the way from, the Vegas to all of your massive shootings, more of bioterrorism events. That's everybody in that group. So you'll always have one member that has done something that can be familiar. So being able to reach out to somebody and say, hey, look, I got this job, what do I do? Especially when it comes to the biohazardous industry, water, fire, other things, there's so many of those that do them. But when you get into the biohazardous, that list shrinks massively because it's still not a completely recognized industry, which that's what the American Biorecovery Association is really trying to do. And me going ahead, that's what I'm planning on doing, is develop the awareness, the educational, and we also are trying to fight for state regulations.
Okay. What kind of state regulations do you see as necessary? Like, what would be some of the initial things you think you'd pursue in that area?
So you have the Waste and Trauma Act, which California enacted back in the 90s. That was to register companies. We actually have a ABRA member that registered his dog. So you can actually see the lack of compliance and the follow through within that. Now you have from Gordy Powell,
Mhm.
his hard work. He's an ABRA member. He started the bill in Georgia and that passed.
Okay.
That bill, a few loopholes, as well as it really concentrates on the company itself, not the individual technician. So right now we have a bill in New Jersey, which we're hoping. Right now we have one in the Assembly and one in the Senate. And that actually is geared towards both the company registers as well as the individual technician. So the technician will have to have certification from the IRCRC, through ABRA, through a third party vendor that at least minimizes at least 16 to 24 hours of just biohazard remediation training. Then the company needs at least 1 or 2 employees to be registered a company that can perform this work. That way, we are knowing that these companies are not just hiring anybody and the training is valid. And one of the biggest things that we've seen, and I've seen in the industry, is you get somebody to open up this business and then all of a sudden they get a big job and then they call their cousin's best friend, their best friend, and says, hey, I got a job, can you come and help me? So there's really no growth in this when it comes to actually sustainability to
Okay.
grow individual technicians. And that's what the regulations really emphasize. It's not only on the regulations to per se protect the consumer, it's also to protect the technicians, to make this actually a valid industry that can be recognized going forward.
Okay. What do you see as, so you talked about the fail rates, which are really high. So what do you see as like some of the common mistakes that companies doing biohazardous remediation work are making? Like mistakes that maybe they don't realize they're making, but they are making and shouldn't be. The
And
big
this
question.
is, yeah, it's a big question, but saying yes. I
Okay.
think the whole restoration industry is is guilty of this. Is just getting that phone call and saying,
Sure.
yes, I can do it.
Yep.
And instead of taking a step back and say, do I have the right questions, or do I have the right questions answered? And when I took over from my father, what happened is I started questioning my father on every little thing he hated it about at me. He's like, Scott, come on, I've been doing this for 15 years. I'm like, yes, but 15 years is not now.
Yeah.
You stopped asking questions after 5 years in the business because you thought you knew it all. So here now I'm coming in and saying, okay, should this be done? This be done. And when I started asking questions on the state level, what I found was we were doing a lot of things backwards. And there was a lot of things that might not have been thought about on the state level. So they're now going, oh, should we be doing it this way? So it started questioning their methods as well. So by teaming up with them, we were able to kind of establish some type of, not regulation, but some type of guidance in New Jersey alone. Now, in most companies, what they do is they don't ask that question.
Hmm.
They don't ask. They just go, okay, I'm going to type online, use ChatGPT or use whatever, and just say, what is the regulations? Or they don't want to call. They're scared to call and ask. And then if they do call and ask, they get the confused state representative on the phone going, I don't know. And that's where they end. Instead of trying to educate the state, getting into the conversation, that's the biggest mistake that I've seen in this industry. Because in all honesty, knowing how to clean up is basic, knowing to use the right chemicals. Like the label is the law, understanding that you can't use certain chemicals in HVAC, you can't use certain things around certain items. Understanding all of that, it's a whole nother aspect of our industry. But one of the biggest things that we see and I see is not asking the basic questions. Okay, how do I get rid of the waste? Can the waste go in? What does my state classify as medical waste? And if what when you decide and when you see, can I classify it as medical waste? Who's classifying it? Is it myself as a company or is it the state?
Mm.
Now, as a company, we overclassify, but we classify it. So we're overclassifying that waste in 99% of our jobs. Now we have that capability because we're generating that waste. So it can get very complex when you jump into this. And that's why I tell people you need to ask the right question. And this is exactly where our industry has turned because you'll talk to some people and they'll be like, oh, I know the answer. Do you really know the answer? No, you've probably been taught this for 10 years and you don't know the answer because when you learned it 10 years ago, well, guess what? It's changed because now it is becoming more recognized. Um, and with COVID and certain other aspects that we're seeing, state regulations as well as state awareness is becoming more knowledgeable. So they understand. So that's kind of where I see the biggest mistake that I see right now is by not asking the right questions because the foundation of your company has to be established by the answers of the right questions.
Yep.
And if you're not asking the right questions, then you're not building the foundation to grow or to do the right job out in the field.
That's a perfect answer in so many parts of business, right? Sales and marketing and all that. If you're not asking the right questions, hiring, if you're not asking the right questions, you're not going to end up with the results that you're looking for. So that was a good answer. Okay. So as you talk about all this, education obviously is key here. And you've mentioned that ABRA has some education. There's the S540, there's other things. So where do people start if they're thinking, all right, I heard what Scott just said, and we're not asking the right questions, and I want to start doing this right if we're going to offer a service like this? What would you say are the best educational steps to actually learn to do this kind of work correctly?
This is a really good question, and a question that many might disagree on me with.
Okay.
Um, so I wrote a letter of interpretation in 2018 about the 40-hour HAZWOPER, which is the private industry chemical wise. It's what is required when you do chemical spills and cleanup, the 40-hour HAZWOPER. So I wrote OSHA, and OSHA came back and said, yes, if it's a declared emergency, yes, it would be needed in blood cleanup. So now people will say, what is a declared emergency?
Uh-huh.
And this is where the fine lines. So, for example, for my guys, the training that we go on right off the bat, you can't go on any of my jobs unless you have a 40-hour HAZWOPER with OSHA. This is 40 hours of classroom setting and then 3 hours of supervised experience after that. So that's the minimum. I tell everybody to say that. The reason I say that is my people who disagree with me on that statement will say not every job needs a 40-hour HAZWOPER. And they are correct on that. The problem is all it takes is one job to require it, and then it's required.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, say 60, 70, 80% of my jobs require it. Why am I not going to make it mandatory for the other 20 as well? Knowing that 60 or 70 is, and that's how ABRA looks at it. That's actually a prereq for the first level of the test for certified biorecovery tech is a 40-hour HAZWOPER. Now, 40-hour HAZWOPER, you do have a 16-hour. I love the IRCRC. I'm actually an instructor through an approved instructor through the IRCRC. However, regarding that, I love the S540. I liked the concept. It's not the Bible in my way. There's a lot of limitations. However, taking a 16-hour blood class, crime scene cleanup class, will get you the basic knowledge that you need going forward. So you
Mm-hmm.
have your 40-hour HAZWOPER, you have your 16-hour that's bio related. And then I always tell people, your bloodborne pathogens, your HAZCOM, all your minor OSHA stuff that is required that you should be looking into. Other than that, I do recommend the OSHA 10 in general industry or construction. I make my guys do the OSHA 10 in construction, and that gives you a baseline of understanding the health and safety of construction sites. Now, although what we do is not construction, a lot of suicides, a lot of times make us take things down
Yep.
that might require construction aspect. But the HST course in the IRCRC is also another valid choice that I tell people to take if they don't want to take the OSHA 10.
Okay.
So that is another way. So the short answer, 40-hour HAZWOPER, a 16-hour blood course, that would probably include your bloodborne pathogens, and then a 10 to 13-hour safety course like an OSHA 10 or an HST. That is your core before I feel like you should even step on a job. And then professional development is key after that.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get that, then you continue to learn, because that's going to give you a baseline knowledge. But the complexities of our jobs could be from industrial accidents, from airplanes. I've had bodies explode in airplanes before, so we've had to clean that up. So you have to look at all concepts going forward. Is understanding there's in the biohazardous field, you can't stop learning. In any field, you can't stop learning, but in this, professional development is key.
Yeah.
So I named the top three before you can even go out. So another topic on that before, because we did talk about it before off air, is I have the apprenticeship program. So I have an approved Department of Labor apprenticeship program. So for my guys to start to finish, it's 295 hours of classroom, all the way up to 4,000 hours in the field to complete
Wow.
my apprenticeship program. So that's a 2-year apprenticeship program. So I'm bringing in 18, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds that want to see the development. So I
Yeah.
have steps. I have 3 steps, and it has the price ranges. So But from the start to finish, it's 295 hours of classroom. So by no means are my technicians any short of knowing the industry.
Yeah.
All the way up to 4,000 to 6,000 hours. 4,000 is minimum, 6,000 is the max, really, it takes to pass. And this is all signed off by myself or one of my safety guys or my PMs.
Hmm.
So that's how we've geared ourselves to become, I want to say, more elite in the biohazard remediation, is concentrating on the training more than just going out and just winging it, by developing a career path for my technicians to show value in their work,
Yeah.
which has driven my business to a lot. And that's why also I have a lot of government contracts, is mainly because once you get into bigger contracts, governmental, healthcare, when it comes to biological response, biohazard response, they want to know your techs are trained and they know what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm guessing that that's super interesting. So I'm guessing your apprenticeship program also has a way of weeding out people that just are not made here. I feel like it could go either way. Like it's going to weed out some people and it's also going to set people up for an amazing career if this is the journey that they want to go on. So talk about that career aspect. That's something in restoration that we talk about kind of no matter what niche that you're in, is you need to create a career for people to attract them into your business. So how have you seen this apprenticeship program? Like maybe you have an example of somebody that's on your team. How have you seen this apprenticeship program help take somebody who's maybe fresh out of college and turn it into a full-fledged career that they're good at? Maybe they're making good money, supporting a family, whatever that may be.
So I have three great examples, actually four, but two of them didn't work out and two of them did. One of my lead supervisors right now started with me 6 years ago. You know, it was just when I was building the apprenticeship program and everything, and he was one of the first in it, and he built all the way up. Now he's one of my highest paid. He's making a very good living. He loves field work, and he's when we've been on jobs and we've had to sub out in other states, like some of my government contracts are like, we still want you guys to go there and sit for a job, but you can sub out, but we still want you guys. Some of my guys will fly out and be like, Scott, wow, like this other company, thank God we were there. Like
Uh,
they know the basics. And I'm like, okay, so that's what I've seen. Now I had somebody also came from the Dominican, came here to play baseball, was successful at that, but then left the baseball field, and then jumped into our apprenticeship program. Right now, he's been with me for 3.5 years. 3.5 years, and he's doing great. He's making great money. He's enjoying it. His training is exceeding what he thought. He comes to America, I want a better life. He thinks baseball doesn't work, and then what's he going to fall into?
yeah,
And he looked at us as, okay, this is a stepping stone. But since then, he has turned it into a career, and that was because of the apprenticeship program. Now, I had another individual. She was phenomenal. She just started our apprenticeship program. She was with me for 6.5 months, and she was doing great. But unfortunately, we had a week where we had three kids that were all we had two kids in one incident and then another kid that were killed by loved ones.
mm,
And that takes a big toll.
yeah,
And although we have debriefings, although we have counselors, you could see emotionally that was triggering for her.
yeah,
We sat down, and she said, look, I love it, but I just can't
yeah,
do it. Knowing that this job is a possibility, I said, look, we won't send you on these jobs. She's like, no, we still keep in contact. She still comes in the office once in a while, says hi. She's doing great. But that was a mere fact of understanding that there was limitations there.
yeah,
Um, I hired a 17-year-old actually off a summer program that I helped out the state with. He worked with me on at the office for about 6 months before I let him go out in the field when he turned 18. And once he turned 18, he loved it. He had a career path, but then he's like, you know what? Do I really want labor, hard, intense labor for the rest of my life? Um, and so he ended up going, he's like, look, I'm going to take some time and go back to college. So he went back to college. Now, do I think he's going to come back? Don't know. So we ended up his apprenticeship program was like 9 months in when he stepped away. So I told him if college isn't for him, come back and we can start right back onto that 9 month track and get him. But he loved it. At 18, he said, Scott, he was making the most money out of his friends.
Oh, I'm
Like,
sure.
yeah, like exactly. A lot of overtime, um, per diem shifts and everything. So he was making what he could and he loved it. It's just sometimes the stress, it can
Yeah.
get to you. And with any type of restoration, like if you look at it, it's a unique individual because
Mm.
you have to also during you're leaving your families at months at a time, sometimes in water, fire, in large cat events, or in blood. My dad missed my daughter's baptism. you
Mm.
know so it was either me or him go, and my dad's like, I'm not going to make you miss your daughter's baptism, so
Yep.
he went. So Christmas, Easter's, you know, birthdays, all of these days, you have to be willing to understand that you're going to sacrifice your family's time for other families. And all the way from your significant others to your kids, they need to understand that, or that will take a toll on you. So when you're making a career, being very upfront with the individuals, your onboarding is huge. You know, like I said, with me, you're sitting in classrooms for 2 weeks before you even go out in the field to see if you like it, with demonstrations, pictures, understanding the work schedule. Then you go online. It is an investment for me for the first 2 weeks, but this is why the questions, when we're onboarding, is huge. You know, can you handle this? Have you experienced loss in your life? If they have, you have to be worried, will that trigger something? So, what type of loss? So, there's a lot of things that go on with our onboarding. We have a 2 interview process. You sit with my office staff first, they interview you. If you think, then I come in and do that. After that, 2 weeks, and then your career. But all of that is written in stone.
Mhm.
And this is where you're going to be if we continue. That has worked very well. And being able to read people out, like you said, in the beginning,
Mhm.
you could. And you can see that because with my 2 hours and 95, with 295 hours of classroom, this is all classes that I need you to sit for. I don't schedule them, I leave it up to the individual. So I'm like, hey, look, here's the classes you can have, schedule them. If you're with me for a year and you haven't scheduled one class, guess what? I might not want you there in that position, maybe as a field tech, or, when I'm doing my annual reviews and I'm sitting there and like, okay, where do you want to be? You want to raise this, this, this? And they're sitting here like, well, I've scheduled 6 classes, I've completed 5 of them. That shows me, okay, you're motivated.
Yeah.
You're motivated. Okay, I like this. So that helps me. But again, that person's like, well, I've been too busy. I've had this going on. I'm going to sit there and say, do you really want this? Or
Mhm.
maybe this isn't for you. And that has helped me a lot weeding out some people.
Yes, I bet. So you talked about also kind of the debrief portion of being in this role because normal restoration companies, okay, we went to a really gross sewage job today, or maybe we had a hoarding cleanup. And I think for the average restoration company, if you're not doing biohazard, that might be the worst you get. You guys are in a completely different realm. So how do you look out for kind of the overall well-being of your team? Like, are there certain things that you watch out for as a leader as signals of like this person might need some extra help after this job? Or what does the debrief look like? What do conversations look like? How do you keep an eye on your team and yourself?
So,
I know
yeah.
that we get like um, I've worked in news for a long time. I worked in news before this, and so I had been on a lot of crime scenes. I'd covered a lot of things, and you do to a certain point like desensitize, but I still think all of us have a certain level. I don't think any of us ever become just totally desensitized. But anyway, go for it.
Oh, no, 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 no. I hear you. There is, so when I teach, there's three episodes in my career that still to this day make me tear up. Um, Kids I struggle with.
Yeah.
I have two kids at home. I have a 10-year-old and I've had a 7. The issue with I was talking about with that woman that left our company, I went home and hugged my daughter probably for no joke 2 hours that night.
Yeah.
Like when I do that, my wife looks at me and basically looks at my daughter and says, daddy's had a hard time at work, just let it.
Yep.
Like, just hug him. Like, just hug him. Um, I've actually, I'm a Lego collector. I'm a big Lego guy. So I probably, no joke, have 40, $50,000 worth of Legos. Yeah, exactly. Um, that is my time to kind of build.
Okay.
So where I can put my headphones on, I listen to music, and I just sit there and I'll build my Legos.
Yeah.
And from the Titanic, from spaceships, I've had some beautiful sets, and that's how I'm able to kind of just relax, which I do need from time to time. Now, when it comes to debriefing, I like psychological first aid. So psychological first aid is a concept created for pediatric children
Okay.
as well as first responders going out to a job, how to kind of decompartmentalize all the way down to debriefing and how we do that. So my once you become a technician for me, you get about 8 hours of training for debriefing and psychological training. 8 hours. Once you become a supervisor, that eight turns to 24. Um, my technicians really don't talk to the members of the family. My supervisors do. That's why they go through a little bit more extensive training when it comes to that. Now, when it comes to alcohol use is one of the big things, which is harder for 21, 22, 23 year olds. And that's actually an onboarding question that we ask and we write that down. So for me, I'm like, okay, how many drinks do you have? Look, if you have 20 a day, I don't care. Just I need to know a starting point. And it's like the same reason why we get X-ray chest X-rays when we're doing asbestos, so we can see progressively
Hmm.
what if we're being exposed. So this is my same concept. Is I'm like, how much do you drink? Don't lie, be honest. Da da da. Do you use marijuana? I need to know that. This. So then I can kind of relate. So if I had somebody drinking 2 drinks a week, now they're up to 10 to 12, and I look at their load, that's a problem.
Yep.
Now I'm going to sit down and say, hey, what's going on? I see you going out much. And they're always going to come up with an excuse. Oh, well, it was only, this week. But then keeping an eye on them. And then what we do is at that point, if we see something like that, we will bring in a group counselor. So I won't single them out. I'll say, okay, guys, time for a monthly or quarterly group session with the counselor. And we would all go and I'll start talking and I'll be like, hey, guys, this is how I'm feeling. Does anyone else feel like that? And then I'm like, look, if you guys need it after this session, just here's the counselor's number and he'll bill me. It's private it's private. So he's like, Scott, I had somebody, da da da. That's fine. But I encourage that. But every job is a debriefing. Now, water does this, fire does this, but they do it on more of the profitability
Hmm.
instead of the actually technicians emotional, strong. So I will bring everybody together or my PMs. Hey, how was your job? And yes, they should do it every job, but they don't because not every job is treated equally. In our company, it should, but I'm not out on every single job, and I know my technicians do not treat every job equally, so I'm not going to lie. But normally, when there's a bad job or if there's a big job, I'm on a job. My father's on the job. One of the higher ups on the job. So the debriefing normally says, okay, hey guys, how's everyone feeling? Think about this, trying to de escalate it. One of the biggest with psychological first aid is we try to incorporate what you're doing and how you're doing it. And a huge impact was when I had an 18-year-old just start from me. Um, and it was the one who left, but he came up and he's like, I never knew the impact we had on a family until we had a triple homicide and the wife came and hugged my technician and said, thank you so much for being here. And after that, he said his viewpoint of our industry became a lot more on how to handle it
Yep.
because he's like, Scott, I could decommodalize. They're doing a job, but we're doing the job because somebody got hurt and we're helping so somebody else doesn't have to do it. He's like, that's how it's going to get me through. And my whole life, that's normally how it gets me through any bad job is thinking of it that way is this is just I hate to say just blood, not looking at the emotional aspect, but at the end of the job, look at what we've helped that family overcome and understand that that's a big step for them to get over their grieving is to now not realize or not see that scene and not be exposed to that scene because let their lasting image be of their loved one, you know, at Christmas, not smeared all over the walls and melted into the ground. And I don't mean to be descriptive, but that's what we walk into.
Yep.
So that's a big factor. And when we debrief, that's how we do it. We just sit down and we just talk about our day sometimes. We do a lot of company events. Um, we do a lot of things that just, and I try to explain to them, find something that you can shut your mind off. I'm a Disney guy. I love Disney. I go every year. I got married at Disney. So outside of Legos, it's Disney for me. I go 2, 3 times a year with my kids. That's what I cherish. And that's what's able to pull me away from our industry, um, and be able just to relax. And if you don't have a family, you got to find something else. But it's really debriefing to me is getting them to understand what works for them, not what works for me. And if they understand what works for them, they'll be successful. And some people, unfortunately, can't find that and they end up not working out in the industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, before we wrap it up, one more kind of topic on best practices. So this is a multi-layer question, so I'm gonna just kind of maybe I can rapid fire these to you. So my first question is labeled trucks or blank trucks that blend into a neighborhood when you go into a neighborhood?
I label everything because legally you have to.
Oh,
Yes. So DOT and everything, there's requirements when you transport hazardous waste or
mm,
regulatory medical waste. So they have to be somewhat labeled.
okay.
But my theory on that is your EMS has already been there. Your fire department's been there. Your police department, every
People
nosy
know
neighbor
something
has their
happened.
head out. Something
Yes.
happened. So if anything, would you want to be known as being professionally cleaned up? Or do you want to think they're just throwing things out in the trash when they bring a bunch of garbage bags outside the following day? I've only been saying, like I said, 12, 15,000 jobs. Say I've only been asked once. And that was actually a high case where the FBI actually asked me to do a non-marked vehicle
Mm,
because so that was the only time was government agency asked me to unmark it because it was a high profile case. And we actually went in to look at the job as kind of mimicking FBI agents for them. So it's actually pretty cool. But that was like one of the biggest jobs the only job actually that I've got asked, hey, look, can you do unmarked because it's not released yet? We're trying, certain things. So
yeah.
other than that, I've never been asked to not have it labeled.
Okay. And what's your take on social media? What is shareable? What is not? Do you promote at all? Do you even have a social media page? What are best practices in that arena? We could do a whole podcast on that, but
I was just about pretty good. I'm not in charge of my social media. I've yelled at my social media people before. So does things get added once in a blue moon? Yes. If I see them, it gets taken down right away. So I'm not the best at it. I don't really like social media. I think social media could be used for educational,
yeah.
but the problem is people use it as educational, but it's really not for educational purposes. It's for commercial gain. They disguise it as education. For you to say, "Hey, I'm going to video this blood scene for educational purposes," but not explain anything in the scene, I'm sorry, that's not educational. The S540, the second revision, which just came out last year, actually has a provision in it saying that you should not, it is the standard of care not to use um, pictures for commercial gain. Now, how you relate that to commercial gain is up to each individual company. But to me, we don't like to post pictures. Um, that relate to blood incidents are high profile, especially on a job site, on a social media. Now, do I say one or two might have got thrown up there throughout the years? Absolutely. Just because a size company,
Yep.
you're not in control of everything. So we do have protocols, things of that nature in place, but I do not recommend using it for the awe statement. on social media. If you're in a training, I'm doing in New York, Long Island, I'm doing a bunch of series for true crime,
Mhm.
a couple in June, and I do have presentations that have scenes. But I'm going to be a speaker and a lecturer at something that's designed for that. The
Okay.
problem is if you're doing social media, you don't know who's looking at it, you don't know what's going on, you don't have control. Absolutely should not have any blood pictures, and if there are, should not be identifying where, what, how, any of that. It needs to be very blanket, and if anything, use more of a genetic pictures from, like Photoshop, not Photoshop, like
Like
the
iStock or
yeah,
like
yeah, the eye stock,
yep,
like, get them from there,
yep.
um, and just do that. Don't use your own. But like I said, I can understand some people slip up once in a while, or they're like, wow, this is cool. I want to post it. But if you're continuously doing it, I think it's a big, huge problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Scott, anything else before we wrap it up? We've talked about a lot. This has been great. I've learned a lot. So thank you. Anything else you want to add?
um, Well, this year, the American Bio Recovery Association is so my goal real quick is to, like I said before, is to get regulations in almost every state going forward. But our test fee was $150.
Okay.
Well, since it's 2025, we're actually dropping it down to $25 for the rest of the year. We actually want people, because people take this test and then they go, wow, I did not know I needed to know all of this.
I didn't
So,
know what I didn't know. Yeah.
yes, and we want people to at least take the test. And we thought, $150, a lot of people were like, So I'm like, so we as a board said, okay, $25 for the whole year. You register, you meet the prereqs, and you become a certified tech. And my encouragement on that is bringing everyone together in the bio world, but to get government recognition through that would be beneficial to everyone in the industry. And
Mhm.
that's my biggest push on the American Biorecovery Association is take the test, see how well you do. It's would be surprising. Most people probably listening to this podcast will be like, oh, I'll pass. This is easy. And then they're the ones who, I'm sorry, going to get 55, 60. So I'm going to push it out there and say out loud to everyone, I challenge you. Like, I challenge who's ever watching this to meet the recs and take the test and see if you truly know the biohazards industry. And if you do, guess what? You have a new designation that you can put on your wall.
Yep.
But when you fail, I just email me or call me and say, yeah, whoops, what do I do next? And look, if you're going to get in the industry, please come in, enjoy it. It is a fun industry to be in. And I mean fun by, it's an adventure. There's no two jobs you like. You're always going to be changing up things, and you're going to find some really cool and interesting jobs that are going to make you think outside of the box.
Yep.
And if you're able to do that, then this industry is going to be awesome for you. If not, water and fire.
Awesome. Well, Scott, thank you so much. For people who are listening, it's americanbiorecovery.org. If you want to find more, I think the test, the board of directors, all the different things. So Scott, thank you so much for being here and all of your insight and knowledge, and congrats on being the new president. I look forward to crossing paths with you, maybe at some shows this year or something. It's been a minute since we've seen each other. So hopefully we cross paths
Yes.
here.
Yes, we will. The RA conference coming up. I think you'll be there. So will I. So
I will be there. Perfect. All right. And anybody who's listening should come to that as well. So
yes.
yes. Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Have a great rest of your
Thank
day.
you.
For more Restoration Today and the latest news, visit our website, cnrmagazine.com, and find the latest episodes of the Restoration Today podcast on your favorite podcasting platform.